Okay, now we're starting with watercolor paints, and all you need is a little watercolor set. This is by Van Gogh, not the artist Van Gogh, but the company that makes the paints now. And what I did is I printed this photo on watercolor paper. This is a student grade watercolor paper. It's obviously going to be better if you use a higher grade watercolor paper, but it doesn't really matter. Just different effects, and the more textured your paint will look. So what I'm doing is I'm just wetting. You know, if you want a lighter color, use more water. If you want a more intense color, use less water and more paint. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use these to color in the lighter areas. So work for the lighter colors first. You know, the more pastel colors you want, do that first. But don't keep going back over it, because whatever ink you use to print, like this is an inkjet printer, it's going to, you know, obviously you add water to it, it's going to kind of run the dyes a little bit. So you could spray a fixative on it first, like a workable fixative, and that way you can work on top of that. It's gonna help keep the inks there a little better. So I did not do this with this one. This is just for demonstration purposes. So right now I'm just kind of adding a little bit of light color to this. And then I'm going to go back in and add a little bit of a different tone. So I can dip it back in my water just to give it some more. So while my paint is wet on my image here, I'm going to just dab in a darker color, work it in. You can also lift colors out. If I didn't like that look, I could dab colors off with my paper towel and go back in after. Okay, so it's kind of like, you know, like being an artist, which you are. So you're just gonna paint. And you can, and the more transparent your colors are, like, I don't have a problem with you using the cheap Crayola watercolors. I mean, they work just as well in this technique, and nobody's gonna tell the difference. So who really cares? If you were, you know, a watercolor painter, obviously you'd want to use the better watercolors, but for this kind of technique, it's alright to use whatever you have on hand. I find sometimes the cheaper the better. Okay, so I'm just blotting off, and I have a variety of different sizes. I don't like to leave my brushes in the water because that kind of ruins them, but this is just a cheap Crayola brush that I found at Hobby Lobby. It works fine. So I'm just painting. Okay, so you're starting to see the image transform. And this is great for backgrounds. Like, this picture's perfect for that. My husband probably thinks I'm a little nuts talking to myself down here. These paints are very vibrant, so I'm trying to tone them down a bit. Never worked with watercolors before, you know, practice a little bit on a separate piece of paper, watercolor paper, and see how you know, the more water you add, the lighter your color is going to be. You can also mix colors, so if I wanted more blue-green, I can mix it in my watercolor tray here. And even if you mix a color and you like it, and you don't use it all and it dries, you can re-wet it and it works next time. Excuse me. So here I am, just painting away, and I might use some of, you know, the darker colors. Don't use black. Never use black unless you're mixing it to make a darker tone. And I only say that as an art teacher because watercolors are supposed to be opaque, or sorry, they're not supposed to be opaque. They're supposed to be transparent. And if you add black, making it very opaque. But if you're using black just to mix a color, like to darken a color, so here I'll take a little bit and I'll darken this green. Okay, just to make a darker color is fine. Just don't add too much color. You know, don't make it too dark, too opaque. So they're supposed to be see-through. That's the beauty of this with the photograph. And again, a fixative will allow that ink to not get pushed around. You're altering your picture. That's basically what you're doing. And when you alter something, you're changing it. You're changing the color of it, you're changing the composition a little bit because some of that ink is going to get moved around. And that's okay. That's what you want, to experiment and try new ways to get your imagery. And here you can see I'm layering colors. So I started with my lighter, working with a more vibrant tone now. Vibrant hue. Hue is another word for color, if you didn't know. Some of you might have known that. And you can just keep adding, pushing color away by adding more water. So you can see I'm starting to build up and making this a more dramatic picture. Whereas before it was a little blah. A little bit boring. Now, not so boring. Okay, and when I'm done with that, it's going to be fabulous, fabulous. All right, I'm going to do a background. It's a good idea to have a paper towel to blot, you know, your brush on, so you can kind of not get so much color. And make sure that you're getting enough on there. So if you dab it on your your paper towel and you don't like it, it's probably better to do it there than on your picture. Okay, so I'm going to add that. It's a little bit darker blue. You can blend some of the colors like in the background. I'm just going to make them more vibrant. You can also wet your paper first with water and then add your color. That's called a wet on wet, and you can see it bleeds. You can push it around a little more. So wet on wet will make a fuzzier, bleeding kind of edge, whereas wet on dry paper will make a harsher, more crisp edge, more exact. Less water, more vibrant. See? Less water. More water. When it dries will be more pastel. Okay, so I'll just keep doing that. Alright, so, you know, play with your watercolors. Spray a fixative over your inks first if you want it to stay and not move around. If you don't mind it moving around, then just go right to your photograph that's printed on watercolor paper. You can also do this on matte photo paper, you know, matte finish. Glossy, you can try it. It's just the colors probably aren't going to stay on. They're going to bead up on a glossy print. Okay, so you can see what it's looking like here. Kind of having a pretty look to it. Ooh, I like how that blend. So happy accidents work too. Alright, so that's watercolors on watercolor paper. A photo printed on watercolor paper. Alright, so I'll just finish that and you'll see the finished one in the PDFs. Alright, I'll be back for another technique.